Welcome back to the HAD channel. I want you to just take a breath and imagine standing on a beautifully lit deck. You're in the very middle of a vast open ocean. And, the air around you is freezing.
Right, just biting at your face.
Exactly, biting your face. But the atmosphere on the deck itself is, it's incredibly warm and inviting.
Yeah.
You can hear a string band playing softly in the background. Your glass is full. You are surrounded by the most elegant woodwork and polished brass and glowing glass that you have ever seen.
It sounds perfect.
It is. It's so peaceful. And then you feel it. Just a tiny, faint vibration beneath your feet.
Wow.
Yeah, just a subtle scrape that passes in a moment. And it is so quiet, so gentle, that you might not even pause your conversation. You have absolutely no idea that in less than 3 hours, the largest, most magnificent moving object ever built by human hands will be completely gone.
It is a truly haunting image.
It really is.
Because when we speak about this famous ship, we almost always rush straight to the tragedy.
Oh, the sinking.
Yeah, our minds immediately go to the noise and the chaos and that sudden heartbreaking end.
Yeah.
But tonight, our deep dive into the source text, History After Dark, the night the Titanic sank, well, it asks us to do something different.
To take a different approach.
Exactly. It asks us to slow down. We are going to reflect on the quiet human experiences. We want to understand the deep, profound peace of that calm night and explore exactly why this story continues to touch our hearts today.
Right.
But to truly understand the loss of this ship, we first have to settle our minds and, try to understand the dream that brought her into existence.
Okay, let's unpack this because I'm struggling to understand something right from the start.
Okay, what's that?
Well, if I am a passenger stepping onto this massive ship in 1912, I'm trusting it with my absolute survival.
Yes, you are.
So why did people trust this vessel so completely? Like, what was the grand vision that made everyone feel so impossibly safe on a cold, dark, and unpredictable ocean?
Right. Well, to understand that level of trust, we have to look at how the world traveled back in the early 20th century.
Okay.
Crossing the Atlantic was not just a leisurely vacation, It was a vital, busy highway connecting two worlds.
Just a completely standard mode of transit.
Exactly. Millions of people were making that journey. And the major shipping companies, specifically the White Star Line, were locked in this fierce competition with rivals.
Like the Cunard Line, right?
Yes, the Cunard Line and various German fleets. But White Star, they made a very specific, deliberate choice. They decided they did not want to compete by building the fastest ship to race across the water.
See, that is surprising to me. Usually when we think of intense corporate competition, we assume the goal is to be the absolute fastest.
Right, the need for speed. But White Star wanted to compete on pure elegance and scale.
Oh, I see.
They wanted to build a vessel so massive, so steady, and just so heavily layered in luxury that a passenger would completely forget they were on a dangerous ocean at all. Yeah, and that grand vision gave birth to the Olympic class of ships. They were built in Belfast by the shipbuilders Harland and Wolff.
Okay.
Construction began in 1909, and when the Titanic was finally launched in May of 1911, she was a marvel of the modern world.
Unprecedented.
Absolutely. We're talking about a ship that was 269 meters long.
That is just, it's hard to even picture.
It really is. She was essentially a steel island capable of carrying over 3,000 people.
But it wasn't just her physical size that mattered, right? The source material describes her more like a floating luxury hotel.
Yes.
It makes me think of a modern, high-end resort.
Yeah.
Like when you go to a beautiful resort today, the architecture is specifically designed to hide the mechanics of the building.
Oh, that's a great point.
You never see the heavy plumbing or the electrical grids or the concrete foundations.
Right.
The industrial reality just disappears, and the guests only ever experience the magic and the comfort.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. The designers wanted crossing the Atlantic to feel entirely effortless. First-class passengers could wander through these stunning restaurants and cafes. They had access to a swimming pool, a fully equipped gymnasium, and even a Turkish bath.
A Turkish bath on a ship in 1912.
Incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
But beneath all of that delicate beauty lay a massive, roaring industrial heart.
The machine that made it all go.
Exactly. Buried deep below the decks were giant boilers, heavy steam engines, and just the complex systems required to push this floating city through the water.
Right.
She was also fitted with advanced safety mechanics. This included watertight compartments and remotely operated watertight doors, which gave her this aura of invincibility.
Wait, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go ahead.
If the designers cared so deeply about making the passengers feel safe and comfortable, why did they only put 20 lifeboats on board?
Yes, the lifeboats.
Because 20 lifeboats could only hold about 1,178 people.
Right.
That is barely half of the people she was capable of carrying. Wouldn't complete safety be their greatest marketing tool?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the legal framework of the era actually dictated that decision.
The law.
Yes. The ship designers were not breaking the law. In fact, the Titanic carried more lifeboats than the law required.
Wait, really? How is that possible?
The fatal flaw was that the British maritime regulations at the time were incredibly outdated.
Okay.
They were not based on the actual number of human beings a ship could carry.
No.
No, instead, they were based entirely on the ship's tonnage.
Tonnage. Do you mean they calculated lifeboats based on how heavy the ship was?
Not exactly. In maritime law at that time, tonnage did not refer to the weight of the ship.
Oh, okay.
It referred to the enclosed internal volume of the vessel. It was a measurement of spatial capacity.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and those regulations had been written decades earlier for much, much smaller ships.
Right, before anything like this even existed.
Exactly. The lawmakers simply had never imagined a ship the size of the Titanic because the law only required a certain number of lifeboats for a ship over 10,000 tons.
And the Titanic was what, much larger?
She was well over 40,000 tons.
Oh, wow.
So the regulations completely failed to scale up.
So the builders simply followed the outdated math of the law.
Yes, they did. And furthermore, they believed the ship itself was its own ultimate lifeboat.
Because of those watertight doors.
Exactly. The prevailing theory was that even if the ship struck something and began to flood, well, she would stay afloat long enough for another ship to arrive.
Oh, so they didn't even think they needed to evacuate everyone at once.
Right. The lifeboats were never intended to hold every passenger at the exact same time. They were merely designed to act as ferries, gently moving small groups of people from the damaged Titanic over to a rescue ship.
I mean, it's just so tragic when you know how it ends.
Ew.
But if that was the grand design, this perfectly safe floating hotel, who were the actual people stepping onto this ship when she finally left port, because the Titanic left Southampton on April 10th, 1912, and then she stopped in France and Ireland before pointing toward New York. Who is sharing this journey?
The human element is where this story becomes so deeply touching.
Yeah.
The ship was essentially 3 entirely different worlds, all existing in the exact same physical space, but experiencing the journey in vastly different ways.
Like a layered city.
Yes. At the very top, you had the first-class passengers.
The wealthy travelers.
Exactly. These were people enjoying huge suites, elegant dining rooms, and private promenades where they could take quiet walks in the fresh sea air.
And then just below them, the second-class passengers.
Yes, second class was simpler, but still remarkably comfortable. In fact, second-class accommodations on the Titanic rivaled the first-class experiences on many older ships.
Really? That's incredible.
It was very nice. And finally, deepest down in the vessel, you had the third-class passengers.
Right.
These were largely immigrants, people who were leaving their home countries, leaving behind everything they knew, to chase the hope of a completely new life in America.
Wow.
Their rooms were much more basic, but they had their own warm dining halls, their own food, and their own spaces to play music and share stories.
So what does this all mean? When you really think about it, a passenger's entire reality. I mean, the air they breathed, the food they tasted, the sounds they heard as they fell asleep.
Yes.
It was entirely dependent on which layer of this stacked world they inhabited.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to appreciate the invisible, tireless army of workers required to maintain those 3 separate worlds.
The crew.
Yes. Imagine the journey of a single crew member, perhaps a steward, on a normal evening.
Yeah.
He opens a heavy steel door and steps into first class. Suddenly, he is walking on thick, soft carpets. He hears a string quartet playing. He smells roasted meats and fine wine. He serves a meal, smiles, and then turns around, walking back through that same heavy door.
And it all changes.
Instantly, in a single step, he is back in the hidden working world of the ship. A world of hot steel corridors, the smell of coal, and the constant vibrating hum of the engines.
It is an incredible illusion.
It really is.
Thousands of continuous tiny tasks. Engineers sweating in the heat, wireless operators tapping out messages in a quiet room, cooks preparing hundreds of meals,
Yeah.
and it's all happening perfectly out of sight, just so the passengers could experience a peaceful routine.
And it was a deeply peaceful routine. People spent their days reading, playing games, writing letters, and just making joyful plans for their arrival in America.
So if the ship was so deeply peaceful and the illusion of safety was so complete, how did the crew react when the situation began to change?
Wow.
Because the text notes that on Sunday, April 14th, as the ship sailed through the middle of the North Atlantic, the wireless operators began receiving warnings about ice.
They did. They received multiple messages from other ships in the area.
So they knew it was there.
They did, but again, we have to understand their mindset. They did not ignore the warnings, but they also did not treat them as a mortal immediate threat.
It was just part of the job.
Exactly. Ice was a known hazard of winter travel. The standard operating procedure was to maintain speed and simply rely on the lookouts to spot any danger in time to turn.
But the conditions that night.
Yes, the natural conditions that particular night were completely, tragically working against them. The air was bitterly cold, there was absolutely no moonlight to illuminate the water, and the sea itself was unusually calm.
Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly so devastating.
Yeah.
The source material points out a tragic irony about the calmness of the water, because you would naturally assume that a perfectly flat, still ocean would make it much easier to spot a massive obstacle.
Right, you'd think so.
But the exact opposite was true.
That is a vital piece of the puzzle. When the ocean is choppy, waves crash against any obstacles in the water. If there is a massive iceberg floating in the dark, waves will continuously break against the base of the ice, creating a ring of white foam.
Oh, I see.
And in the pitch black of a moonless night, that white foam is the only visual cue a lookout has.
Because there's no other light.
Exactly. But because the ocean on April 14th was perfectly flat, like a pane of dark glass, there were no waves.
So there was no white foam.
None at all. There was only a dark mountain of ice hiding in a dark sea, perfectly camouflaged against a star-filled sky.
So the lookouts, standing high up in the freezing air, were essentially staring into a total void.
They were, until approximately 11:40 p.m.
That's when they saw it.
That is when the lookout finally saw the dark shape looming directly ahead. The warning was desperately called out to the bridge.
Right.
The officers reacted instantly, turning the wheel hard, trying to steer this massive, heavy, floating city away from the ice.
But you cannot simply turn a machine of that size on a dime. I mean, if just won't allow it.
Exactly. The ship slowly began to turn, but the iceberg was simply too close. Now, if the ship had hit the ice head-on, the damage to the front of the vessel would have been horrific, but the ship likely would have survived. Yes. The watertight compartments would have contained the flooding to the very front. Instead, because they tried to swerve, they exposed the side of the ship.
It makes me think of a car losing control on a highway. Like, if a car tries to swerve away from a wall, it might end up scraping its entire side along the metal guardrail.
That is a very accurate analogy. The ship scraped its starboard side along the jagged, underwater edge of the iceberg.
Wow.
It was a glancing blow, and that is what makes this moment so surreal for the people on board. Because it was a side scrape and not a head-on collision, the impact was incredibly subtle.
Which explains why there was no massive dramatic crash.
Precisely. For most passengers, it was nothing more than a strange, passing noise, a gentle shudder or a faint scraping sound.
So quiet.
Very quiet. Many people who were asleep in their beds did not even wake up. Up in the brightly lit lounges, people simply continued their conversations.
Just totally unaware.
But deep down below the waterline, that scraping guardrail effect had popped the steel rivets along the side of the ship's hull.
And the water came in.
Yes. The freezing ocean was rushing into the forward compartments.
Okay, let's talk about those watertight compartments for a moment. We established earlier that they were the very reason everyone believed the ship could never sink.
Yes, we did.
So how exactly did they fail?
Well, it is a profound tragedy of structural engineering. The bottom of the ship was divided into 16 separate compartments.
Okay.
When the danger was spotted, the heavy doors between them were sealed shut. But the steel walls that separated these compartments did not go all the way up to the uppermost decks.
Why does that matter?
Think of it exactly like a standard plastic ice cube tray you might have in your freezer.
Oh, okay.
The small dividers between the individual ice cubes do not go all the way to the very top rim of the tray.
Right, there's a little space at the top.
Yes. So if you tilt that tray slightly, the water simply spills over the top of one divider and flows right into the next section.
Oh, wow. I see what you mean.
As the front compartments of the Titanic filled with heavy ocean water, the tremendous weight began to pull the front of the ship down, tilting the tray.
Exactly. As the bow dipped lower, the water rose to the top of the first compartment, spilled over the wall into the second, filled the second, and then spilled over into the third.
That's terrifying.
It was a compounding, unstoppable mathematical certainty. The ship was going to sink.
But the passengers sitting in their cabins have absolutely no idea that this mathematical certainty has just been triggered.
None at all.
I am trying to wrap my mind around the psychological state of these human beings. A crew member knocks on a cabin door and politely asks a passenger to put on a life jacket.
Yeah.
The cognitive dissonance must have been entirely overwhelming.
This raises a deeply important question about human psychology. How do we process unthinkable change when everything around us still looks perfectly normal?
Right, because nothing looked broken.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The initial evacuation was incredibly quiet because there was absolutely no obvious danger. The ship was still floating steadily. The electric lights were glowing warmly.
Right.
The musicians were literally playing cheerful music on the deck. Imagine standing in that warm light. You are surrounded by the absolute pinnacle of human engineering, a space designed to make you feel invincible.
Yes.
And an officer calmly tells you that you need to leave this giant, brightly lit haven, step into a tiny, fragile wooden rowboat, and allow yourself to be lowered 60 feet down into a pitch-black, freezing, terrifying abyss.
It's unthinkable.
It goes against every single survival instinct a human being possesses. You would look at the dark ocean, look back at the beautiful ship, and think, well, I am infinitely safer right here.
And that deeply understandable human reaction explains one of the most heartbreaking details of the entire night.
What's that?
When the crew finally began lowering the lifeboats, they were partially empty.
People wouldn't get in.
People simply refused to step into them. The very first boat to leave the ship had room for 65 people. It was lowered into the dark water with only 28 people on board.
Oh, wow. That's just tragic.
Across all 20 boats, they were launched averaging only about 60% of their true safe capacity.
Because no one could force themselves to believe the floating hotel was actually dying.
Right. It was a strange, quiet period of uncertainty. But as the minutes ticked by, the ocean slowly revealed the truth.
The tilt.
Yes. The angle of the deck began to grow steeper. The bow of the ship sank lower and lower into the freezing water, and the massive, heavy stern began to slowly lift into the night sky.
And as that terrifying reality set in, I have to imagine that those rigid social rules we talked about earlier, the strict boundaries between first, second, and third class, they must have begun to completely dissolve.
They absolutely did. The beautiful illusion of the luxury hotel vanished.
Right.
The ship's immense size, which had been its greatest selling point just hours earlier, suddenly became its fatal trap.
It was too big.
There was simply too much ship and far too many people to evacuate in the very short time they had left.
Wow.
As the danger became obvious, the social distinctions faded into the freezing air. It did not matter if you were a wealthy aristocrat or a hopeful immigrant.
Everyone was the same.
The only question that mattered in those final, desperate hours was, who is close enough to reach a lifeboat before time runs out?
For the lucky few who did manage to step into a lifeboat, the experience must have felt like waking up on another planet.
I can only imagine.
I mean, they were sitting out there in these small wooden boats, floating on the dark water, looking back at the Titanic.
It was a deeply surreal nightmare. They sat in the freezing cold, watching this mountain of electric lights slowly disappear into the ocean.
So hard to comprehend.
And then, at approximately 2:20 a.m. on the morning of April 15th, the massive ship slipped away entirely. Her maiden voyage was over.
In just a few short hours, the world had completely changed.
Yeah.
And now, these survivors are left sitting in the pitch-black darkness, listening to the sounds of the shifting ocean, hoping with everything they have that the distress calls set by the wireless operators had been heard by someone.
They sat in the dark. Some prayed silently. Some simply stared into the void, desperately hoping to find family members they had been separated from in the final confusion.
Just waiting.
Yes. Far away, the ship RMS Carpathia had indeed heard their calls and was pushing her engines to the absolute limit to reach them.
But it takes time.
The ocean is vast, and the distance was great. They had to wait in the silent cold for hours before the sun began to rise and help finally arrived.
And when that sun came up, The true, devastating scale of the loss became clear. Out of the roughly 2,208 people on board, approximately 1,500 had died.
The world was completely stunned.
I'm sure.
When the survivors finally reached land, the news rippled across the globe. People demanded to know how the safest, most advanced ship ever constructed could sink on her very first trip.
Naturally.
Investigations were launched immediately in both Britain and the United States.
And those investigations uncovered all the mechanical and systemic failures we just discussed, right?
Yes, they did.
The lifeboats based purely on internal volume, the subtle glancing blow, that ice cube tray effect of the watertight compartments.
Yes, and the sheer shock of those revelations forced massive, sweeping changes to global maritime laws.
Like what?
Well, lifeboats were finally required for every single human soul on board, regardless of the ship's physical size.
That makes so much sense.
Radio communications were required to be monitored 24 hours a day. The loss of the Titanic completely reshaped the way humanity approached safety at sea.
But the source text gently reminds us that behind all those new laws and behind all the engineering statistics are individual, profoundly human stories.
Very true.
Thomas Andrews, the architect who helped design the ship, was on board.
Yes, he was.
He knew exactly what the math meant when those compartments began to overflow. He did not survive.
No, he didn't.
Neither did Captain Edward Smith. J. Bruce Ismay, the chairman of the White Star Line, did survive in one of the boats. But standing right alongside those famous names were hundreds of firemen, cooks, engineers, and young families looking for a new life.
And that is deeply important to remember as we reflect on this text.
Yeah.
We study the engineering, we study the laws, but ultimately, this is a story about people.
Real people.
People who are simply doing their daily jobs. People who are enjoying a lovely, elegant dinner. People who stepped onto a massive steel ship, believing with absolute, unwavering certainty that they would wake up the next morning and continue their journey.
It is a gentle but painful lesson. It reminds us that no matter how incredible our technology becomes, no matter how much we master steel, steam, and electricity, the natural world, the ocean, remains vastly powerful and entirely unpredictable.
The story of the Titanic endures in our collective memory because it holds a mirror up to our own humanity.
How so?
It shows us our incredible brilliance, our ability to build sprawling, floating cities, and our deep, sometimes naive trust in the things we create.
We build beautiful things, we dream of the future, we travel across oceans, we place our absolute faith in tomorrow.
We do.
And sometimes, quietly and completely without warning, tomorrow changes entirely. The people who live through history almost never know they are making it. To the passengers on April 14th, it was just an incredibly ordinary Sunday evening. A warm meal, a quiet conversation, a peaceful stroll on the deck, looking up at the stars.
They were simply living their lives, trusting the calm seas around them, completely unaware of what lay just ahead in the dark.
It makes you wonder, as we sit here tonight and reflect on their journey, what incredibly ordinary moments are we living through right now, completely unaware that history is waiting for us just beyond the horizon? Are we perhaps a little too trusting of our own calm seas? We will leave you with that quiet thought to mull over tonight. We bid you good night. Rest well, and leave your thoughts with the peaceful imagery of the silent, dark ocean, where ships continue to sail forward.